My name is Vanessa Cole. I was 31 years old. The night my older sister dragged me across a ballroom floor by the wrist to use me as a punchline. She did not ask if I wanted to meet her new father-in-law. Her fingers locked around my pulse, pulling me past tables covered in white peonies and crystal centerpieces. Camera flashes caught the chandeliers and the beading on her wedding gown. She stopped in front of a silver-haired man who controlled one of the largest freight networks on the West Coast, pointed at me, and smiled. "Meet our family charity case," my sister Renee said. Our parents stood just behind her, holding champagne flutes. My mother, Diane, added her own line, soft and rehearsed. "We don't really talk about her much. She just does computer things in her apartment." They waited for the man to laugh. Here is what none of them knew. I was not a charity case. I was the person holding the keys to the empire they were trying to buy their way into. And the man they were trying to impress already knew exactly who I was. Let me tell you what happened when the laughing stopped. If you've ever been the quiet one in a family that only had room for one star, you already know this feeling in your chest. Stay with me. The wedding was held at a vineyard estate outside Napa, the kind of place where the string quartet plays over the sound of wind moving through the grapevines. I had spent the first 2 hours of the reception at table 19, tucked near the kitchen doors, catching a cold draft every time a server pushed through with a tray. I didn't mind. I watched the waitstaff move through the room, and, without meaning to, I started mapping their routes: who was fast, who was slow, where the bottlenecks were. My brain does that. I'm a data systems architect. I look at complicated, moving things, and I find the parts that are broken. When Renee grabbed my wrist, it wasn't affection. It was a prop request. She needed to show her new father-in-law, a man named Walter Graham, exactly which sister was the success and which one was the disappointment. Walter stood near the head table in a charcoal suit, a glass of bourbon in his hand, flanked by 2 men who were clearly not just wedding guests. Renee pulled me directly into his line of sight. "Walter," she said, using the warm, practiced voice she used on clients. "This is my sister, Vanessa. Meet our family charity case." My mother stepped up beside her, offering her own soft, apologetic smile. She does little computer repairs. Nothing like what Renee's built. Renee extended her free hand toward Walter, expecting a laugh, a handshake, some quiet acknowledgement of her superiority. Walter did not look at her hand. He did not laugh. 5 seconds passed, then 10. Long enough for the confidence to start draining out of Renee's smile. Walter lowered his glass. His eyes moved from my face down to my posture, to the plain black dress I'd bought off a clearance rack, and then back up to my eyes. He set his drink down on a passing tray. "So it's you," he said quietly. "This is unexpected." Renee blinked. "Sir, I just meant, you can stop talking now," Walter said. He never raised his voice. He never looked away from me. My father, Gerald, stepped in to smooth things over. "Walter, I think there's some kind of misunderstanding. Vanessa's she's a ghost." Walter interrupted. "A ghost who builds better systems than anyone on my payroll." My mother let out a confused little laugh that died in her throat. Renee stared at me, her mouth slightly open, the smugness gone. The brother she'd spent her life stepping over, no. The sister had just been recognized by the man she was trying to impress. Walter gestured toward the open terrace doors. "Walk with me, Vanessa." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked into the night air. I looked at Renee one more time, pulled my wrist gently from her loosened grip, and followed him outside, leaving my family standing in the wreckage of their own joke. Take a second and imagine that feeling, being called worthless by the very people who are about to find out exactly how wrong they were. Comment below if you've ever had a moment like that. But to understand how the family charity case ended up holding the keys to a freight empire, I need to take you back. My family had built their whole identity on a lie. And the lie had a name: Renee. Renee was marrying into money. Her new husband's father, Walter Graham, owned Graham Freight Solutions, a logistics company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. My parents had spent the past year treating the engagement like a business acquisition. They'd spent a decade funding Renee's failed startups, covering her losses, paying for her downtown loft, bankrolling the image of a visionary founder, In their eyes, Renee carried the family's potential forward. I just carried a laptop bag. Growing up, the roles in our house were fixed. My parents worshipped appearances, the right zip code, the right country club, the perfectly curated holiday photos. Renee was their masterpiece, confident, magnetic, destined for a corner office. I was the quiet second daughter who liked motherboards more than networking mixers. Because I didn't wear designer blazers or attend galas. My mother decided early that I was a lost cause. She called me the basement dweller when I refused to take their money after college and instead worked night shifts at a data center to pay my own rent. They didn't call it independence. They called it bitterness. I became the parasite. Even though I never once asked them for $1, the real irony lived on a small external hard drive. 3 years before that wedding, before Renee's company, Meridian Root Systems, even existed. We briefly shared office space in a converted loft downtown. I was consulting, building complex routing algorithms real, working, patent-worthy architecture, and storing 2 years of that work on a single silver drive. One afternoon my terminal froze. The drive failed. I spent 10 hours trying to save it before it simply stopped spinning. Renee walked in carrying 2 coffees, watched me stare at the black screen, and put a hand on my shoulder. Hardware fails. Vanessa, don't beat yourself up. She offered to drop the corrupted drive at a data recovery place downtown. Sparing me the trip, I handed her 2 years of my life in a small silver rectangle. She never took it anywhere for recycling. She paid a cut-rate developer to crack the partition, pulled my routing architecture, polished it just enough to pitch investors, and used it to secure her first round of seed funding. Renee didn't build Meridian Root Systems. She stole it from the sister she considered a failure, and then had the nerve to ask me, year after year, why I wasn't climbing higher. I figured it out eventually. But a woman working night shifts at a server farm doesn't win a legal fight against a golden child backed by wealthy parents and a team of lawyers. So I stayed quiet. I watched her take the credit. I let them call me a parasite. I waited. I just never expected Walter Graham to be the one who finally handed me the match. This is the part where a lot of people would have given up. But sometimes the quietest person in the room is quiet because she's building something you can't see yet. Let me know in the comments if you relate to this. The terrace air smelled like cut grass and distant wood smoke. Walter closed the glass doors behind us, cutting off the string quartet. He rested his hands on the stone railing and looked out over the dark vineyard rows. 2 years ago, he began. Our Western distribution hub went dark. A coordinated cyber attack hit our central dispatch servers. Every manifest, every transfer, every customs clearance vanished behind encryption. My internal teams were paralyzed. Federal cyber units gave me a timeline measured in weeks. And then, at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, a patch landed in my chief security officer's inbox. No name, just an anonymous address and a string of code. He turned to look at me. It didn't break the encryption. It built a temporary route around the infected servers and kept freight moving while the main system sat in quarantine. It saved my company an estimated $400 million over 5 days. I spent 18 months trying to find whoever wrote it. 3 weeks ago, my team finally traced a digital fingerprint to a login. They pulled a badge photo. He paused. And tonight my son introduces that same woman as a charity case. You should have billed me a consulting fee, he said quietly. I don't write code for credit. I told him. The system was broken. I just realigned it. That's exactly why we're out here, he said, his tone shifting into something more businesslike. I'm finalizing the acquisition of your sister's company. 9 figures. My due diligence team has been through her numbers. On paper, it's a rocket ship. Too clean. Real systems have friction. Hers doesn't. He asked me to run a quiet, independent audit of Meridian Root Systems outside his formal team. Before he signed anything, I didn't want revenge. Revenge is emotional, and emotion corrupts data. But I wanted the truth. And if Renee's company was hollow, I wanted to be the one who found it. I'll need root access to the raw server logs, I said, not the polished reports. By morning. He nodded once. You'll have it before you wake up. Careful what you brag about at your own wedding. Rene, not everyone in the room is impressed by your slideshow. I didn't go back to table 19. I left without saying goodbye, without watching them cut the cake, and drove home through empty highway lanes toward the city. My apartment was small and deliberately bare, no photos, no cluda, just 3 curved monitors and a chair that had cost more than my car. I turned on the machine and found a secure message already waiting. A single access code. The audit was authorized. Meridian's server traffic told a story. Its executive dashboards never would. Real human traffic is messy. People click the wrong buttons, get distracted, drop off when their internet stutters. What I found instead was a metronome. Clusters of enterprise clients, supposedly based across the Midwest, logging in at exactly 2 a.m, running a query for exactly 4.2 seconds, then logging out, over and over, every night. With mathematical precision, Renee hadn't onboarded 40,000 new clients that quarter. Like her executive summary claimed, she had built a bot farm, a small army of automated ghost accounts pretending to be real customers, faking growth to justify a 9-figure sale price, buried inside the routing code that ran the fake traffic. I found a tag times protocol 0, my own naming convention, a habit from college, mistulen code, still running underneath her fraud. Running that much fake traffic costs real money: server space, hosting, bandwidth, all of it billed weekly. I traced the payment gateway and found a wire transfer leaving Meridian's account every Friday, routed through a Delaware clearinghouse, landing in an account belonging to a shell company called Blue Horizon Holdings, registered to a P.O. box in Reno, Nevada. No office, no named executives, just a mailbox. Over 8 months, the transfers added up to a staggering number, a company hemorrhaging cash it didn't have, since its seed funding had run dry months earlier. So who was still paying? This is where it stopped being about one dishonest founder and became something much bigger. I promise you, it gets worse before it gets better. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Dinner tonight at 7. Please be on time. The word please was doing a lot of work. I showed up in a plain sweater, the uniform of the unremarkable. My parents lived in a gated community outside Sacramento, all imported stone and manicured hedges. Inside, the dining room smelled like rosemary and expensive candles. Renee sat at the center of the table, radiating rehearsed calm. Her new husband wasn't there. This was a family matter. My father, Gerald, looked different than he had at the wedding. Gray under the eyes. His hand kept drifting to his chest. So, Vanessa, Renee said partway through the salad course. An artificial smile fixed in place. You disappeared pretty fast the other night. What did Walter want? He asked about my background. I said evenly, your background. She repeated, laughing lightly. Did he want tips on server maintenance? I didn't answer. Silence, I've learned, is the loudest weapon in a room built on performance. People rush to fill it. And in that rush, they reveal themselves. My father tried to redirect. This is a big month for your sister. The Graham deal is entering its final stage. Cash flow's been tight lately. A lot of capital's tied up right now. I filed that away. A real estate portfolio doesn't get tight during a celebration dinner unless something underneath it is cracking. He wanted my opinion on network integrity, I said finally, looking directly at Renee. Specifically, the processing load required to sustain synthetic, cyclical routing traffic. The table went silent. Renee's hand froze around her wine glass. She knew exactly what those words meant. And in that frozen second, she understood that I was already inside her system. I stood up. Thanks for dinner, I said, and walked out. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can say to someone is the truth, delivered so calmly they can't even accuse you of attacking them. Just after midnight, someone pounded on my apartment door. Not a knock, a fist. Desperate and heavy, I looked through the peephole and saw Renee, hair falling out of its style, mascara smudged, smelling like wine and panic. I opened the door to the length of the chain lock. Open the door, Vanessa, she demanded. We need to talk. We're talking, I said. She hissed through the gap. What did you tell him? You show up at my wedding. Whisper to Walter Graham. And then throw around network jargon at dinner, like some kind of threat. I said nothing. She filled the silence herself. sliding from panic into her old default condescension. You sit in this apartment staring at screens thinking you understand how the real world works. It doesn't. I built a company while you debugged mainframes for hourly wages. If you try to sink this deal out of jealousy, I will make sure you never work in this industry again. Are you finished? I asked. Her face went pale. I wasn't hunting for a glitch. Renée. I was asked to run an audit. You don't have 40,000 enterprise clients. You have a bot farm. And you've been paying for it every Friday through a shell company in Reno. Because your real revenue never covered the cost. The color drained further from her face. Then she tried tears. You don't understand the pressure. I just needed a head start. Once the deal closed, I was going to shut the fake accounts down and build the real thing. You couldn't have built the real thing, I said. Because you didn't design it. I did. 3 years ago, you took my drive to get it recycled. You paid someone to crack it and used my architecture to launch your company. Everything you have is built on what you stole from me. Vanessa. Please. If Walter finds out, I could go to prison. Please don't do this to me. To us. I'm not doing anything to you, I said quietly. You built a tower on a cracked foundation. Gravity was always going to finish the job. I'm just the one holding the inspection report. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Take a breath here with me. This is the moment a lot of people would have folded under guilt. She didn't. And neither should you. If you've ever been guilted into protecting someone who never protected you. Through the peephole. I watched Renée's posture change, despair sliding into something colder. She pulled out her phone. She wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was building a defense. Within the hour. My monitoring system flagged an email from René to Walter's HR director, warning them that I was an unstable former contractor suffering a mental health crisis, prone to fabricating data out of jealousy, and urging them to disregard anything I submitted. She was trying to discredit me before I could expose her. I didn't panic. I used it. I needed something more than server logs. I needed proof tied directly to her master administrator account. Something no lawyer could blame on a rogue employee. So I planted a small, harmless-looking flag, a compliance report noting a string of luxury resort charges on her company card. Billed during a week she claimed to be at a supply chain conference in Miami. A rounding error in a 9-figure deal, but a deeply embarrassing one for someone obsessed with her public image. I submitted it through the shared due diligence portal, where she'd see it immediately, as I expected. Her ego couldn't let it sit. At a little past 1 a.m, she logged in using her master admin credentials to quietly erase the charges, and in doing so, briefly lowered the system's security shields just enough for my tracking script to slip in behind her and pull the deep server logs I actually needed, the ones proving her master account had personally authorized the fraudulent bot network. While that download ran, I chased the money one more time. The Blue Horizon Holdings wire transfers traced backward through the bank's clearinghouse using a decryption key their own lazy developers had reused. The originating account wasn't Renée's. It was tied to a newly filed second mortgage on 3 commercial properties. Properties my father had spent 30 years acquiring. I want you to sit with that for a second. Because I had to. This wasn't just one sister's fraud anymore. My father wasn't just aware. He had walked into a bank, signed his name, and put the family's entire financial legacy on the line to secretly keep his daughter's fake company alive long enough to sell it. The dinner conversation echoed differently now. Cash flow requires precise timing. He wasn't worried about the market. He was terrified of a felony. By 6 that morning, I had everything: the stolen code, the fraudulent traffic, the shell company, and now an unbroken digital signature tying René directly to the fraud. I showered, put on a simple charcoal suit, and drove to Graham Freight Solutions' downtown headquarters for the 9 o'clock signing meeting. In the lobby, my father stepped out from beside a pillar to block my path. "You're up early," he said, his voice still carrying the old authority. "I expected a delegation," I said. "Sending you alone feels like a tactical error." He tried to reframe the moment as a business discussion, not a family collapse. When that failed, he threatened me, disown me, cut me from the will, erase me from the family, and then, in the same breath, offered me a bribe, a senior technology role in the newly merged company. A 6-figure salary. If I simply walked in and gave Renée's company a clean audit. "You're offering me handcuffs." I told him, "I'm an auditor. My currency is the truth. I walked past him toward the elevators. This is the part where I stopped being someone's daughter and became exactly who I was always meant to be, someone who couldn't be bought. Upstairs. The boardroom looked like a set built for a celebration, champagne on ice. Floor-to-ceiling windows over the bay. The merger contracts already printed. Renee sat near the head of the table beside my father, radiating false calm. Walter's son, her husband of 1 month, sat beside her. And across from them sat Walter's daughter, Claire, arms folded over a closed folder, saying nothing. I took the seat farthest from the champagne. Walter walked in, bypassed Renee's outstretched hand entirely, and sat at the head of the table. Before we sign anything, he said, I want the foundational audit, not the summary. Vanessa, the floor is yours. I connected my tablet. The polished growth chart on the screen dissolved into raw server logs that synchronized 2A40 logins. The identical 4.2-second sessions. I explained, in plain language, that this wasn't stress testing. It was a bot farm. Then the financial trail, the weekly transfers to a shell company that didn't exist anywhere except a mailbox in Reno. Then the code comparison, my 3-year-old architecture on one side of the screen, Meridian's proprietary routing engine on the other. Identical down to the same internal tag. You are being asked to purchase stolen property, I said. Renee's voice cracked. He's lying. He hacked our systems to frame me. I put up the final slide, the time-stamped log of her master admin account editing expense records at 1 a.m. The same login window used to authorize years of fraudulent payments. This account has a permanent, unbroken digital signature tied directly to the fraud, I said. There is no rogue employee to blame. The room went completely silent. Walter looked at Renee the way you'd look at a structural crack in a building you were about to buy. The offer is rescinded, he said. Effective immediately. I'll be contacting the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding fraudulent disclosures. Renee's composure shattered. She begged, then threatened, then begged again. Her husband said nothing. His sister, Claire, calmly removed her engagement ring, set it on the mahogany table with a small, final click, and walked out without a word. My father stood, still trying to negotiate a settlement that no longer existed. Security was called. I watched my family be escorted out of a building they had spent a year trying to buy their way into. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something quieter. Correct. If you've ever had to choose between protecting people who hurt you and protecting the truth, I hope you know which one actually sets you free. In the weeks that followed, the fallout moved with the unstoppable pace of a controlled demolition. The SEC opened a formal investigation. Investors filed civil suits. Meridian Root Systems filed for bankruptcy. Renee was indicted on charges of wire fraud and investor deception. When the bank discovered the true purpose of my father's second mortgage, foreclosure proceedings began on all 3 properties. The house outside Sacramento went up for sale at a loss. The image my parents had spent decades building came apart in a matter of months. My mother left a voicemail a few weeks later. Her voice raw. She apologized for the nickname, for taking Renee's side, for years of dismissing me. Then, almost in the same breath, she asked me to call Walter and ask him to go easy on Renee. To save the family, she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking me to trade my integrity for their comfort one more time. I deleted the message. My phone rang again almost immediately. It was Walter. I trust the fallout hasn't disturbed your routine, he said. I prefer to watch chaotic systems from a distance. I told him, the data's cleaner that way. He laughed, genuinely this time, and invited me to lunch at a quiet club outside the city. Over the meal, he slid a leather folder across the table and offered to become his company's chief information officer. Full equity stake. Corner office over the bay. I turned it down. If I take a title, I become part of a hierarchy again. I told him. I spent 31 years inside one that only valued me for what it could take. I won't trade one cage for a nicer one, no matter what it pays. He studied me for a long moment, then crossed out the job offer and wrote a new number in the margin, instead an independent consulting retainer. Full autonomy, reporting only to him. I signed it. And that, to me, is the real ending. Not the money, not the boardroom. The The moment I finally got to choose my own terms. Driving home that evening, I thought about the word my sister had used to introduce me at her wedding. Parasite. She meant it as an insult. But a system that only survives by feeding on someone else isn't strength, it's dependency wearing a nice suit. My family built an empire out of fabricated numbers and borrowed money, certain that confidence alone could outrun the truth forever. It never does. The truth is the most patient auditor there is. And sooner or later, it always balances the books. If there's one thing I'd want you to take from my story, it's this: being quiet is not the same as being weak. And being underestimated is not a life sentence, it's an advantage. If you're patient enough to use it. I turned away from the window that night, sat down at my desk, and got back to work. Because peace, real peace, isn't something anyone hands you. You build it yourself. One honest line at a time.